Hello and welcome back to my shop. I'm working on a picture frame for my son and I wanted to put a couple of splines in that frame. The problem is I don't have a spline jig. So today in this video I'm going to build a spline jig out of some scraps I have around the shop. It's not pretty, but it's functional. So come on along, join me, and let's get started. To save time in the video, I've gone ahead and cut all of my parts for the spline jig out and I have them ready to start assembly. The main part is the fence that will run along the fence of my table saw. This fence will line up against the table saw fence, slide back and forth. I've made it nice and tall. My dimensions are 9 inches tall by 14.5 inches deep. There's no real secret to that. That just happened to be the depth of the piece of board that I had. And the idea behind the height is I can lay a picture frame or a box in here and I've got a little something to support it so that it's not wobbling and I don't get my spline wallowed out. You'll also notice I've already gone ahead and I've got my 90-degree lines drawn on here. These are the lines that I'm going to lay my supports for my box or my picture frame that'll be getting the splines cut in it against to get them at a perfect 90-degree angle. Other pieces that I've cut, this is the outside wall. It is cut to the same dimension of 9 inches by 14.5 inches. Now it really doesn't need to be this tall and it probably will get in the way being this tall. So once I get my bases mounted that will hold the box or the picture frame upright, I'll adjust this and probably cut it down to a much more convenient size. These are the bases that the picture frame or the box will set in, and it'll hold it at a perfect 45 for the blade to cut the spline. The dimensions on each of them are 7 inches by 8 inches, and I've cut a 45 on the corner of each of them. I got a couple of small pieces here. These will be used on my fence to help support the jig against my table saw fence. I'll move the camera and show you how they'll be applied. I've temporarily applied a clamp just to hold this in place so I don't knock it around and damage it. And now I'll explain what these parts are going to be for. My table saw fence has a sacrificial fence right here, and that sticks up 3/4 of an inch above the fence. Luckily, this height is the exact same as the thickness of my MDF. So I cut a piece here to sort of fill the gap between the sacrificial fence and my standard fence. This white piece will mount to the inside fence and ride along the top of my fence along with this piece here. This final piece will mount up under the top piece, and this forms a nice little pocket that will ride on top of my fence and support the jig. My plan is to assemble this entire jig using 1 5/8 inch deck screws, and I'll countersink each of them below the surface so that they don't interfere with the table or the fence of my table saw. I've drilled and countersunk all of my holes, and I've gone ahead and clamped the pieces, the first 2 pieces I want to assemble, to my fence. I drove screws into the first brace for the spline jig, and I was preparing to attach the second brace, and I noticed something that I want to point out to you guys. Right over here on this side, my MDF split. Even though I pre-drilled, it split when I drove the screw. This is not a total loss. I'll remove this piece, and I've got some of this, I guess it's melamine, and I'll go ahead and recut these 2 pieces out of the melamine, and then I'll get them reattached. So minor setback, not going to hurt us that much. I recut the 2 cradle pieces. I've got this side attached, and I've got this side just held on with a clamp right now. And the idea is to make sure that my 90 is perfect. When I slide my rafter square in there, I have no play. So I feel really comfortable that I've got a good 90-degree angle at the bottom here. I'm going to go ahead around to the back, get my holes drilled, get this side attached permanently, and then we'll move forward with the build. I've got both of my cradle pieces mounted in place, and my 90-degree angle is absolutely perfect between the two of them. There's no play whatsoever. So now I need to put the outside piece on to the jig. I mentioned earlier that this piece was too long. What I'm going to do is scribe a line right across the top of the two cradle pieces, and I'm going to cut this top piece off, and then I'll get this attached to the outside of the cradle. My jig is done. I had initially planned to put another piece over here on the opposite side of my fence, but I don't believe I need it. What I have found is, since I had to use a spacer underneath of my top piece because of my sacrificial wood on the fence, that I'm riding very nice and tight against that rail. I feel that if I go ahead and put some wax on my sacrificial fence, as well as on the inside and bottom of my jig, that it should ride incredibly smooth along the rail. So all that's left to do is a test cut. I'm ready to give the spline jig a try. I took my picture frame jig and I cut a nice 90-degree angle. I'm going to drop that into the jig, and I'm going to go ahead and clamp it into place so that it doesn't slide on me. Let's see how it works. And we've got a perfect cut. I'm going to call this a success. Time to start making some splines and some boxes. I wanted to show one last thing. There's my cut for my spline, and here's my spline material. I slide it right into the joint. I've got a nice tight fit. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm real happy. I've got the tape on there because I actually hadn't glued this joint together, so I just used the tape to hold it together, but I don't think it would matter whether it was glued or taped. It cut a perfect spline. And for a jig made out of some scrap wood, I'm very happy. In the beginning of the video, I said that my spline jig wouldn't be pretty, but it would be functional. I think I accomplished that. It works great. I can't wait to put the splines in my son's frame. I hope this has been a good video for you. I hope you've enjoyed viewing it as much as I've enjoyed producing it. If you have, please consider subscribing to my channel. As always, please like this video, and any and all comments are more than welcome. Thank you for joining me today.